I think we've got the majority of the signups logged on. So I know we've got a bit of a tighter schedule with our two guest stars here of the evening. So I just wanted to kind of introduce them, and then I will let them do what they do best, and that's going to be educate you all on the beautiful wines of DAOU Vineyards. So we have with us on the call Mr. Brandon Shepard and Mr. Jesse Cassidy. Jesse, I just met recently, and he's helped us put this whole thing together. And Brandon, I had the pleasure of meeting and working with down at Monterey Peninsula Country Club, where we did some great things with the wine list down there. He was actually one of the first partners that I had a chance to meet with when I took over the wine program down there. And he really helped us bring that to the next level. And anyone who's familiar with DAOU wines, I'm sure would agree that they're just superior quality, great people to work with. And anyone who's had a chance to visit the property, as I know Mr. Cox was alluding to earlier, just a stunningly beautiful property. So hopefully we can get this travel ban lifted soon, and we can all go down to DAOU for a little road trip. Would be nice, huh?
Yeah, that would be a weekend.
So Jesse is our co-host. He's going to share some videos and things later. But without further ado, I will pass the mic over to these two gentlemen and let them do what they do best.
Thank you, Francis, and thank you each and every single one of you for joining on the call. I don't want to bore you too much with my background because our wines are fun to drink, so I'll let you do that. But basically, we want tonight to be a fun, interactive night too. So if you have any questions throughout the entire presentation, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or use the chat box too. So I've done multiple of these throughout the year, and they're always fun too. And I think the best ones are always the ones where people are most engaged as well, and kind of asking questions too. So the plans I have for tonight is basically give you a brief kind of overview of the Paso Robles AVA, and introduce you to my great friend, Brandon Shepard, who's our National Director of Soul of a Lion. He's gonna run you through just the DAOU family history and the DAOU family story. And then finally, we're gonna touch upon some of our favorite wines and some wines that will be offered to you as well, kind of our reserve tier wines, so very hard to find out there, and you'll be getting them at a great price as well. So if you wanna get started, looks like we have a full room too, and ready to drink some wine, of course, and I got my glass right next to me as well. But first things first, my name, of course, is Jesse. I've been with DAOU for about 3 years now. Started off actually as a parking lot attendant, and then moved into the tasting room, worked there for about 2 years, was actually mentored by Catherine DAOU as well, so really got to know the DAOU family, and then accepted my new position up here, so I'm probably close to many of you. I actually live in Redwood City, and I'm the field sales manager for Northern California. So started last March. It's been a little weird year to say the least, but I always say this is one of the only professions where I'm allowed to drink on the job. So I will be doing a little bit of that tonight, as well as I walk you through some of our stories, as well as just Paso Robles. So by raise of hands, has everyone been to Paso Robles? Wonderful, great to see. Have we been to DAOU? All right. I see some hands that haven't been raised, so we'll make sure to set up a day for each and every single one of you to head down there. But just when looking at the region as a whole, it has grown so much. I always say Paso is the new kids on the block. When I say DAOU are the new kids on the block when it comes to Paso too. So when you go back to 1983, when Paso Robles was recognized as an AVA, there were only a handful of producers down there. It was mostly a bunch of cowboys who had cattle ranches down there. And then you had a few people who'd come in maybe from France and start planting some varietals. And these varietals were mostly from their own region. You would have the GSMs. You actually had Zinfandel as well, which was a big one. And was just relatively unknown. People would rarely stop by there. It was kind of a town, as what I've heard from a lot of people in my experience in Paso Robles, is they'd be like, you know, I never knew this was actually here. It's like I would just drive through it on my way from LA up to San Francisco. And that makes it actually very convenient because it's only about 3 hours away from each and every single one of us down south. But as the time kind of went by, Paso Robles started to develop, started to get kind of that recognition as well. You see it go through the early 2000s. You kind of see this cab revolution in a sense too, where now more varieties are being planted. And now there's close to 40 varieties that are planted there today. Cabernet Sauvignon is the most popular, followed by Merlot. And then you have the Syrah, Zinfandel, as well as Chardonnay too. But just a massive area. When you look at the size of it, it's about 614,000 acres. So to put that into perspective, that's twice as big as Napa and Sonoma combined, with about 40,000 of those acres being planted, but very spread out. In the year 2014, the growers actually got together and the producers and winemakers got together and went to the government and asked for the region to be subdivided, because at that time it was the largest region in California and actually one of the largest in the world that wasn't subdivided into different appellations. So 2014, they got together. Originally, they wanted 13, but they decided to do 11. And they, the characteristics that came from each region, it was dependent on the terroir, as we say, which is the French term, basically for climate, for soil, for topography, all these different items that really come into play when it comes to growing grapes to make some wine. So we're, of course, located in the Adelaida district of Paso Robles. That's known as kind of the Western Mountains. So we're a little cooler maybe than the Eastern Plains, which is a little more of an arid climate, much warmer, much less rain as well. They will only see about 10 inches or so. But on DAOU Mountain, we see about 35 inches of rainfall. And from what I was hearing, I actually have family still in Paso, they were expecting snowfall this week too, with kind of the storm that was moving through. So you have these different kind of diurnal shifts that you're going to find in the temperature, different types of soils as well. Going down south, you'll find the Willow Creek district too, which is actually the coolest sub-appellation in Paso Robles. But just describing Paso as a whole, the word that comes into play is diversity, just because you have not only so many different varietals, so many different winemakers, but you really have so many different cultures at the end of the day. I knew multiple vintners that came from France, some that came from South America, others that came from South Africa, and then of course the DAOU brothers who came from Lebanon. And I know we may have some Lebanese folks in here as well. So yeah, love it. So great to see you. I will invite you to a dance party, because I always say Lebanese people are the first to get on the dance floor and the last to leave, from my experience with George and Daniel. So look forward to dancing with you in the future. But when it comes to Paso too, to put it into context, you had only a handful of growers in the early 2000s. Now we have close to 300 wineries today, with all these different types and styles of wine too. So really a melting pot of different cultures. But that's the basic overview. We're going to be getting into the wine, of course. But after further ado, I want to introduce my great friend. DAOU's actually National Director of Soul of a Lion, someone who started in the tasting room as well, worked his way up and recently accepted his new position. And that's my friend, Brandon Shepard.
Thank you, Jesse. You make that way too dramatic, man. You know, I'm not that cool. But I mean, just much like Jesse, I mean, just like Jesse said, in the tasting room that you see here behind me, this is where we both cut our teeth. So when I speak about DAOU tonight, and I speak about the Soul of a Lion and the DAOU story, this isn't me or Jesse talking to you from the perspective as two hired employees. This is two people that are speaking to you from the fact that our hearts are there on DAOU Mountain. Our hearts are in the soil. We've been there during harvest. We're connected through family, and the mountain and the wines really mean a lot to us, as they do to a lot of people that not just work for DAOU, but celebrate the DAOU story. So for those that don't know, you know, George and Daniel's story is amazing. You know, it's truly the American dream. These are two brothers that were born in Beirut, Lebanon, which at the time was considered the Paris of the Middle East, as we've been told, where, you know, one day everything is beautiful and they're spending time on the water. They're spending time with their family. They're not drinking at that time because they're young, but their families are drinking great wine. And then the next day, turmoil hit. You know, there's a civil war that broke out. And that civil war came right to George and Daniel's family's doorstep. George and Daniel were injured during the war there. One of the first missiles that was let off was actually, it injured the family. Their father had a decision to make, and what he decided to do was to flee. They fled and they lived in the mountains for quite a while till things kind of died down a bit. And their mother actually had French citizenship. So they fled to France and grew up there, and that's where they restarted their lives. Joseph DAOU, their father, who's the patriarch of their family, the man who Soul of a Lion is actually named after, you know, was a strong person. And he was someone that was very successful in Lebanon when he was in Beirut. And he knew that picking up and having to start all over with his family and parents, he was not going to do anything but give his all and make sure that they were successful again. And they were. He made sure that he provided a great life for George and Daniel, and they had an amazing time. But again, George and Daniel wanted to make sure that they could take care of their family and repay their father and their mother who had done so much for them. So when George was about 18 years old, he actually came to the US. He spoke 5 languages at the time. None of them were English, but he was here because he knew that the ground was fertile and that if he came here and worked hard, he'd have an opportunity to provide for his family. Now, while he was here, he attended college at UC San Diego. He got a degree in electrical engineering. And while he was studying, he actually sent one of those old, I don't know if you remember those old big Texas calculators. He sent one of those back to his brother who was in France, and his brother started to play around with this thing, and he reprogrammed it. So Daniel was always a genius. Daniel was someone who always, would take something and take it apart and figure out how it was done and put it back together. But when he put it back together, it was always better. And that goes a lot, to what you see in our wines today. But Daniel was inspired by his older brother and wanted to follow suit. So he came to the US as well, attended UC San Diego, got a degree in computer engineering. And shortly after that, the brothers decided to start their own company. They actually spent some time up in Silicon Valley and created a company called DAOU Systems. This was a tech company that actually allowed you to transfer medical records from one facility to the next. So if you think about the story that we just spoke about, you have 2 guys that come here as immigrants. They can't speak the language. They do everything to, work their tails off to have an opportunity. And then, they take that and with this entrepreneurial spirit, create their own company at the right time. Their company actually, they took it public and became the 4th largest IPO in the US. And I think it was 1994. In 1997, they actually sold the company for, we'll just say a few dollars. They retired at the young ages of 30 and 34 years old and decided to really pursue their passion, which was family, love, and creating something that would last, generation upon generation. So Daniel DAOU actually started to study winemaking because he was a collector for a long time. He traveled all over the world, fell in love with wine, and he spent time in Bordeaux. He spent time in Napa, learning under some of the top winemakers of the regions at that time. In Napa, he was actually spending time with Scott McLeod, who was the winemaker at Rubicon Estates, Coppola's property up in Napa Valley. And he was also working with a female winemaker in Bordeaux by the name of Delphine Barbeau in the Right Bank in Saint-Emilion. So Daniel's classically trained by a taste of the old world, if you will, and the new world. So when we start to talk about DAOU and Silver Lion and a lot of the wines that we offer, there's just this linear connection between Bordeaux, Napa, the old world, the new world, but it's a new spin on that. It's Daniel and George's spin. What we say at the winery is that we celebrate humanity through the lens of wine, meaning that we're not a wine company in the industry. We're a people company that's in the wine business. So people come first in our company, and we hope to share that with the people that celebrate our products. So with that being said, I'm sure Jesse and everyone is excited to start to taste some wines and talk about those wines. But the story really does mean a lot to Jesse and I. We're really connected to it, and we're hoping to get you guys connected as well.
And do we have any questions too? Feel free to throw them out there. But of course, I always love when Brandon, you share the story too, and just emphasizing the points of George and Daniel, even though they were able to retire from their first company. This isn't a winery that they just decided to invest in and kind of sit in the back seat and just have their name on it. This is something that they're fully invested in, where Daniel's the winemaker. And I just experienced being up there on the estate during harvest. Daniel looks like he wants to rip his hair out every time that I see him. And we kind of know not to really bother him because he's operating on like 20-hour days where he's basically sleeping in the vineyard, because he'll wake up at 2 a.m. He'll go out, he'll oversee the harvest team. He'll work with them as well. And everything is handpicked. We don't do anything with the machines. So it is one of the most grueling processes I have ever seen in person. They offered some of the tasting room crew to go out there and harvest as well. And some of us volunteered, and we were only out there for about 30 minutes before we decided to call it quits, just because it's such an intense process. But Daniel's out there. He's with his 5 children as well. They grew up on the estate too. They used to live in a small little trailer, which is what we call the modular. We have a gal who works for our company who's also our vice president of hospitality. Her name's Maeve, and she's from Texas. And she's like, it's not a modular, it's known as a double wide. So Daniel lived there with all of his kids. It started off as a very humble experience where they planted the first 10 acres or so with help from some of their friends. Everything was hand planted. And then you move on to the DAOU estate. It's about 214 acres in total. And we have about 125 that are actually planted and underneath the vine. So we've come very far in a short period of time, because 2007 was when DAOU officially opened up. 2011, you have the tasting room that opens up. And then fast forward to 2021, really grown in a short period of time, but that's just due to the dedication that you find in George and Daniel DAOU. But do we have any questions before we move on to our first wine that we have? I know most of you may be drinking some other wines that we have, but the first one I have up on the lineup, if I could get it in front of my camera, it's going to be our 2019 Reserve Chardonnay. So yes, Paso Robles does produce some Chardonnay. There is a misconception out there that Paso Robles is way too hot. That answer is kind of true in a sense. So like I spoke about before, Paso Robles is such a big area. You have the 614,000 acres. It's 42 miles from north to south, and then 32 miles east to west. So you're going to find actually some cooler climate areas within Paso Robles. And where we actually source the fruit with our 2019 Reserve Chardonnay, it's going to come from the Willow Creek district of Paso Robles. So this is actually the coolest district that you're going to find. Paso is very unique because it's a little warmer than other areas in the Central Coast, such as Monterey or Big Sur or Santa Barbara. So it's well suited for Cabernet Sauvignon for the Syrah. But you have Willow Creek, which is a little closer to the coast and in between a break of actually the mountains that we have there. So we're located on the Santa Lucia Range, which basically travels all the way from Monterey down to Paso Robles, but there's a little break known as the Templeton Gap. So basically what that does is it creates a valley, but it acts as a wind tunnel. So you're gonna get all the winds that come from the Pacific Ocean, and it's gonna basically act like an air conditioner throughout the summer months. So you have it warm, you have it in the 90-degree temperature or so, and then you have all that cool air coming in. So it really helps to kind of add to the complexity that you're going to find in the grape, because it allows it to mature and gain sugars, but it also allows it to maintain its acidity. So we don't need to add anything extra. We want to be as natural as possible when it comes to producing some of our wines, because we want to showcase that terroir in a sense. But with our Chardonnay too, there is a slight influence, as Brandon spoke about, with the old world influence that they grew up, that they were experienced to. They would go down to the south of France. They would go to Burgundy. They would go all over France when they were basically children. And I'm sure they were drinking wine before the ages of 18, because that's just the culture over there. But he wanted to showcase that influence and really the acidity and minerality that you're going to find in a Chardonnay. So it's not overly oaked, even though it does see a little new French oak. You're going to find that creaminess to it, but it's not going to be overly buttery. It has this nice kind of kick of acidity, minerality, because of the soils that you're going to find. It's actually similar to some of the soils that you're going to find in some top vineyards in the Burgundy region. And then just with that proximity to the ocean, you're going to find how it's a cooler climate with the acidity really coming into play. But our 2019 vintage, when looking at it, going throughout the years, some of our first vintages were in the heart of the drought that you find in Paso Robles. So very little water. The sun was really beating down on the grapes, so not great production or not great yields during all those years. But 2019, as what Daniel says, was vintage of the century. Just everything was perfect. We had heavy rainfall during the winter months. We got up to about 35 inches of rainfall, which really helped to just replenish the entire environment, the soil, and just add the nutrients back into the ground. And then you just had a steady warm period too, where very little days, very little rainfall throughout the entire period. And we are facing actually to the southeast. So we get a good portion of sunlight and sun exposure throughout the entire day, which really helps to mature our fruit fully in a sense. but 2019 was actually our longest harvest we ever had as well. It was unheard of how far we went into October, almost close to November. So Daniel had a big smile on his face that entire year. He was basically sitting back. He's like, Mother Nature has done the job. My job is just to not mess it up, in a sense. So if you find 2019s, especially DAOU or just any vintage from Paso Robles, I always say buy it up because it's going to go fast because the ratings are going to come out. Everyone has fallen in love with them. And that really showcases the Chardonnay. But when getting into kind of the characteristics that you're going to find, tropical fruit is really kind of what pops out there. Great color to it as well. Not nearly as golden as maybe some of the other ones that you find. But I almost get like peach and apricot as well, and then a nice little creaminess on the tail end. And that's just one example of our white wines, but this is one of Daniel's favorites. Whenever he's having pasta, whenever he's having seafood, maybe scallops, maybe octopus, which is one of his favorite dishes, he's always going to bring out the Chardonnay.
I'd like to see if we can get some, I don't know, is anyone else drinking this wine right now? Has anyone else tasted this wine? You have it. Gordon, would you mind just kind of giving your notes on the wine or your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree. Great balance, sort of peaches and fruit, but also very complex. I really like it. I opened it last night, so this is a little older, after being open 2 nights. But as soon as I opened it last night, really liked it. Really very Burgundian. Not that overly oaky, typical California Chardonnay. So if I was blind tasting, I would have guessed this is a great Burgundy.
That's a beautiful compliment. How's the nose on the wine right now? Because that's the big thing that stands out about this wine is it just jumps out of the glass at you.
Yeah, and I think it's actually better tonight than last night. But of course, that may depend on what else I drank beforehand and what I've been doing all day. But it's a great nose, a very complex, very appealing nose.
Thank you. And Jesse and I, the reason why I wanted to ask that question, Jesse and I were actually, with our different divisions at DAOU, we'll do some different virtual tastings where we'll go and we'll taste some Bordeaux wines or we'll taste different regions. And I think it was yesterday, we just tasted a lot of white Burgundy, right? We were tasting a lot of different wines from the Côte de Beaune, from the Maconnais and different regions. And what we noticed was, I think it was the Côte de Beaune, where it's a little bit warmer climate than in the northern region. And one of the wines that I had tasted was very similar to this wine, where it had a lot of floral notes on the nose, felt like it came from a warmer climate, but at the same time had great acidity and minerality. So it was balanced. But I think with Daniel, he kind of nailed it where he tied that string together between what you're supposed to take, what Chardonnay is supposed to taste like, but again, a newer version of that.
I'm glad you say that, Gordon. I mean, as you can hear, I'm French and I like Burgundy as well. So it's very similar to a very good Burgundy as well. I mean, Meursault, Pouligny-Montrachet, and a very, very fine wine as well. So congratulations to the DAOU family. I mean, very well done.
Thank you.
Yes, we're going to have to share that with Daniel because I'm sure he'd be blushing right now to have someone from France say that is that California Chardonnay tastes like one.
Jesse, can we ask a question?
Yes, please do.
So, how does it compare, let's say, to Napa or Sonoma Chardonnay? Because those are usually fruit forward, usually in your face. How would this compare to that? I mean, compared to both of them said it reminds them of Burgundy.
Yes, for my preference and just what I noticed too, is you're going to notice the fruit on it too, just because it is coming from the New World. So you're going to have that, but it's going to be less drastic, maybe the buttery and the creaminess that you're going to find in some of those other wines too. So what sticks out to me is, of course, the minerality that I get, as well as some of the acidity, just because it is grown in a cooler climate. So Sonoma, with it being cooler as well, you will find those. Napa really depends on where it's coming from because it's similar to Paso too, where it has some very warm areas and then it has some areas that aren't nearly as warm as some other ones too. So it really comes down to the producer, how much oak that they're using. We will do 50% or 11 months and 50% new French oak. So you still have that. And we try to let it go through malolactic fermentation to get that creaminess on the tail end. But Daniel's able to have his influence on the wine too and create something that I think is unique and I don't see very often.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You get to, just to add one last note, I mean, you get that, and Jesse touched on it before, where he talked about this fruit doesn't come from the estate. So when you think about DAOU Mountain, we're about 13, 14 miles away from the Pacific Ocean as the crow flies. So we're a little bit more inland, but this comes from Willow Creek, AVA. So it's much closer to the ocean, cooler climate, lower elevation, but you still have those calcareous clay soils with that limestone. So exactly what you're going to find in the Burgundy region, and also what you'll find in Bordeaux as well. So you get that acidity and the minerality, complexity is going to come from the soil, because that root system is going to dig down deep, searching for searching for water. Everything that we've done for the most part is all done through deficit irrigation. So everything is dry farmed, right? We want to stress the vines. We want to drop fruit. We want to make sure that we have so much intensity and characteristics in the berries that most of our production is very small, but you get just these flavor bombs of amazing wines when you taste anything that Daniel and George produce. So it's definitely a special small production wine that we make.
And Brandon, is that the region where the Pinot also comes from for Paso?
That's a great question. So I don't think we produce a Pinot from the Willow Creek area, but we actually we produce a few different Pinots, to be honest with you. Daniel started kind of playing around with different vineyards. We actually produce a Pinot from Gary's Vineyard. We also have a Solomon Hills Pinot, so he'll source the fruit from some of these historic vineyards in Northern California, and also in Santa Maria, Santa Barbara area. And our discovery Pinot, if you will. So this is the Pinot that you'll see, by the glass or out in retail, a little bit more approachable price point. This wine actually comes from the Central Coast. So it's fruit that's sourced from many different vineyards on the Central Coast of California. Pinot Noir is, it's a love of Daniel's. It's a wine that he definitely loves, and it has a long history in Paso Robles that a lot of people don't know about. So, our property that we have, DAOU Mountain, was previously occupied, if you will, by HMR Vineyard. So it was Dr. Stanley Hoffman, who was the owner, and his winemaker, if you will, at the time was Andrei Chelichev. So while Chelichev was working in Napa with Gurkich and with BV and with Robert Mondavi, he was also working on a small project in Paso Robles on DAOU Mountain, and also Adelaida Cellars, which is our next door neighbor. He was working on Hoffman Mountain Ranch, and the wines that they produced there, this was way back in the late 60s, about 1968 to 1982, they produced Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and were one of the first to plant Cabernet Sauvignon. So the history of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in Paso Robles goes back to the 60s, which is a lot of people don't know.
Interesting, very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yes, and to add to that one as well as what Brandon said about our discovery Pinot Noir. So that's going to come from vineyards in the Santa Maria Valley, which is a very incredible kind of area as well, a little south of Paso Robles, about an hour or so. But at one time was the bottom of the ocean. So their soil is going to be completely different than ours. You would actually find like fossilized sea creatures in that ocean. And then vineyards in Santa Barbara as well. So much cooler climate than you would find possibly in Paso Robles, other than the Willow Creek district. But that is a great question there. And I always love the Andrei Chelichev story too, because if you don't know who he is, I always say, look him up. The spelling, I'm probably going to I can't give it off the top of my head, because he was born in Moscow, but crazy story, had to flee because of the revolution that they had over there. Eventually ended up coming to America, and he's considered the godfather of American wine. So very, very talented gentleman. And Dr. Stanley Hoffman, who actually owned our property before we did in the late 60s, he was able to get in touch with them, had him visit the estate, and then they became friends and developed a friendship from there. And he did all these crazy things when he came. To put it into context as well, Andrei Chelichev, I believe, was like 4'10", maybe 4'11", so extremely small man in stature, but a huge personality. And when he came, he was like picking up the soil, he was laying in it, he was tasting the soil as well. So just this crazy guy, and just from tasting the soil, he was able to tell you what you could grow from there. So a very, very talented man, someone who knew or was able to kind of predict the future in a sense. But Brandon, do you want to jump into our first cab of the day?
Hang on a second, my volume wasn't working here. Yeah, definitely.
Real good. So next wine up that we have and that we want to highlight as well, it's going to be our 2018 Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon. So some of you may be drinking this here always, always, always one of my favorite wines, one of the best wines that we produce, especially for the price point as well. And we have a portion that's going to be sourced from the estate, as well as portion that's going to be sourced from other vineyards that we work with in the area. So Brandon, do you want to take forward, or do you want me to jump into this one right away too? I'm going to
let's kind of go back and forth. So I want you to go ahead and talk about like the technical points on the wine, and then let's kind of converse about it a little bit, because the Reserve Cab is special and it really ties into the soul of wine when we talk about that wine. But let me let you intro the wine, and then we'll dig into the meat and bones of it.
So of course we have different tiers when it comes to our wine. We have kind of the normal everyday Cabernet Sauvignon that you're going to find. That's going to be kind of by the glass options, find it in different retail spots. The Reserve is going to be a step up. And typically how we classify our Reserve wines, it's going to be based off the quality of fruit, as well as the oak aging program that we have. So this is going to see 15 months in 50% new French oak. And then it's also going to have a higher quality fruit. And that's dependent on the thickness of skin that we're going to find, the seed size, and also kind of how much sugar that you're going to find inside that grape as well. With George and Daniel, even though I said before, we like to do a lot of stuff by hand, we want to be as natural as possible. With them coming from the tech industry, we have a lot of technological advancements in the vineyard. So one example is we actually have sensors that go down into the ground, and they're able to sense kind of the root system in each and every single vine. So Daniel always gives the example when he's taking a vacation, when he's going to visit friends and family back in France, he could actually receive text messages from these sensors. So it will tell him basically, let's say vine AC3 in row 36, block D, it needs a little more water. So it's just this crazy sensor system that's able to tell him, hey, let's go send out some people there and let's go have them kind of treat this vine in a sense. So that's one example. We believe in high density planting as well. So the normal vineyard in Paso Robles is going to plant about 1,200 vines per acre. We do about 3,500 vines per acre. And Daniel says it the best. He has a great metaphor for it when he talks about it, a great analogy. He compares it to basically his children and how he raised them. He says, if you have a very easy life and you're not challenged, you're going to be complacent your entire life. You're going to be happy with kind of who you are, where you're at, and you're not going to work nearly as hard. Versus if you have a lot of competition and a lot of challenges that you face, you're going to be the best version of yourself. So he basically treats all the fruit like it's their kids. I mean, he's crazy about this stuff too, where everything's hands-on. We have all these different vines throughout the vineyard, and they touch them, like each vine's touched like 10 times per year or something like that. So a crazy, crazy process, but really just gets the most complexity that you're going to find from the fruit when it goes down into our soils, a calcareous clay that you're going to find. The top about 2 feet or so is going to be majority clay, so helps retain water, especially when it's dry and during the summer months when not nearly enough rainfall is coming into play. But beneath it, we have limestone rocks. So we have dug down in the past and we see actually how the roots are able to attach to these rocks and they're porous. So they squeeze out all the water and really adds a nice minerality that you're going to find into the wines. But as you can see by the wine itself, I need to pour myself a little glass, but extremely deep, concentrated colors that you're going to find from this. I always say kind of the DAOU wine is a mouthful in that sense, because you're going to see these flavors really kind of explode and all these different characteristics come into play, followed by a very long and steady finish. So that's the characteristic I always find on our Cabernet Sauvignon too. You might find a little other varietals in there, but it is majority Cab. And I always think Daniel does a fantastic job with this one myself.
Jesse, I actually want to, you brought up an important point, and I want to share my screen and just play a quick little video. It's the night harvest at DAOU. It's about a minute long, but I just want you all to see kind of what Jesse was talking about. Oh, I don't know, Francis, if you can allow me to share my screen here. Sorry for the curveball.
Yep, you should be a co-host now, sir.
Thank you. Okay. All right, can everyone see that? And let me make sure that you can hear the sound as well. Share sound. Okay, here we go. So this is DAOU Mountain here. This is night harvest. Everything that we do as far as harvesting is done at night. Perfect. I just wanted to share that really quickly because we spoke about the elevation, we spoke about the property. When you think about the slopes on DAOU Mountain, when you when you speak about or hear about the slopes and the angles, our team is going up and down these rows, and they're picking everything by hand. Everything is hand harvested. Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, so it's absolutely incredible to witness it. I always say you have to be part Billy Goat in a sense, because literally, like, it's basically you're almost sitting down in a sense while you're standing upright, just because that elevation and the steep slopes is so severe. And the harvest team is running up and down constantly, because we need to pick all the fruit by the time that daylight comes, because it's going to get much warmer, and we don't want the fruit to start fermenting because they have a natural yeast inside of it. In order to prevent that, maybe some other places, and what you would do is you'd spray sulfur on the fruit in order to prevent that. But we want to be kind of as natural as possible. We don't want to add any more sulfites than are necessary during the fermentation process. So it's one thing that they have a very intense job, but some of the hardest workers I've ever seen, I was only able to do about 10 minutes, and then I called it quits and threw in the white towel just because.
Hey, I have a question.
Yes.
If I bought a case of this wine now, how long would it be good? Would I drink it now? Would I keep it for 5 years? And when would it be not good to drink?
Great question. So since you are getting a case of it, I would say drink one now, and then save one for a few years, save the next for a few years after that, and kind of continue on with that process. Just because with our wine, you're going to see it develop. You're going to see a little more fruit kind of when it initially gets released, in a sense. So if that's what you enjoy, I would say open it up. But if you're going to talk to Daniel, he always says, give it about 5 years and the wine's going to lose its baby fat. So that's where you see a little more of that complexity come into play. You're going to see more of those kind of tertiary flavors and characteristics from the oak. So you get more of that kind of cigar box, the cinnamons, the different baking spices too. So you get a little more complexity as you age it. So it's really, at the end of the day, comes down to what you enjoy and what your preference is. I mean, I like some fruit forward wines, and then I like some other wines with that I'm going to hang on to and open up a little later on, and then enjoy with a steak or maybe a cigar too. So I would say drink a few now, but make sure you save a few. 5 years would be a good marker to break them out. And I had actually a 2010 vintage of this wine earlier or late last year, and it was absolutely fantastic. So that's been basically 10 years or almost 8 years from the release date. So I don't think the wine gets any worse the longer you hang on to it.
I had a 2011 last week, so I know exactly what you're saying. I think the special thing about the DAOU wines is that we're still very young as a winery, right? So we're all, having the opportunity to taste these wines in the early stages. As a winery, we're about 13 years old, and you can still find some of those 2009s, 2010s at the winery and out and about. But these are wines that you can drink now, like we talk about at the winery with Daniel and George. That it's where everything is accessible now. The way he makes the wines are for you to be able to age them for 25 years plus if you want to, but they're approachable upon release as well. And I think that's really special about what Daniel does.
Hey, Jesse, a question for you.
Yes.
Is Daniel the winemaker for all the wines, or do you have multiple winemakers?
We have some that help him out, but with all the wines that we're tasting today or that we're showcasing with the reserve as well as an estate wine, Daniel's going to be in full control of those wines there. So he's responsible for all of that too, all these different processes that he does. We could get into it later, but another machine I want to talk about is an optical sorter that Daniel implemented. So this was back in the 2015, the harvest of 2015. Daniel's always looking at the forefront and how to make his wines better. One thing that he decided to do was, it was this very new technology that came out, and it was actually a trash sorter in France. It was known as an optical sorter. So basically what it does is it has a laser eye, and it's able to scan each and every single grape that passes basically through this machine. So it takes about 3 milliseconds for this machine to detect if it's a grape we want to use versus based on the thickness of the skin and the seed size. So if it rejects a grape, if it's not up to Daniel standards, it's going to basically have them go over a jump, and then it has a little burst of air that pushes it down, and it's going to discard it. But of course, we don't throw it away. We actually sell those grapes to a distillery, and they're going to make different spirits based off that fruit there. So Daniel was the one who implemented that. He's in charge of all the winemaking when it comes to our reserve and our estate wines.
Another question for you.
Yes, please ask.
I'm curious if you felt any impact from the fires we've had in the last couple of years.
Yeah, so we have been very fortunate being in Paso Robles and just our wind patterns. I believe it was 2017 where we had a scare, which was a fire that was close to our vineyard, but being in the proximity of the Templeton Gap, like I talked about, we almost have like a halo wind pattern. So none of the smoke was able to reach our estates. This year as well, we had a little smoke come in, but Daniel said it had no effect on any of the grapes and any of the fruits. So our vintage was saved. But of course, our heart goes out to our friends in Napa. It's been terrible what's been happening up there every few years now, it seems, or almost every year with their fires. So we've been lucky and fortunate enough, and we thank our blessings each and every single day that we haven't had any smoke taint that has affected our fruit.
A question on your vintages for your Cabernet Sauvignon. Which vintages do you like? You say you go back to 2008, 2009, I thought I heard you say. And do you have a library? Do you have all those vintages available for sale at the winery?
So we have a Daniel's personal library, and that's just with the estate. So it's mostly for the wine club members that we have. They'll release some certain vintages throughout the year, but it's a very small selection. Going back to the question we were asked, like, how long can you age our wines? The problem that we have is everyone buys them and everyone drinks them. Yeah. So Daniel will hold some off to the side in the library, and then we'll have a slow release in a sense, but it's mostly done through the wine club. And some of my favorite vintages too that I'll talk about, Brandon, I'm sure you could share some of yours. 2012 is one of my favorites. And then 2014, I think, would be considered my favorite vintage just from the wines I've tasted. Looking at it, 2017 was another phenomenal one. 2016, it's basically like, which ones do I like a little more? I don't think we've had any bad vintages, but I would say the 2012, 14, 16, and 17 are the ones that really stick out to me.
Great.
Yeah, for me,
Okay, Tracy has a question here. Tracy, go ahead.
Quick question. How are you?
Hello.
How did you arrive at the selection of wines that you are offering to our membership for sale? Did it go through the wine committee and Francis, or is it something that, was it a collaborative effort or your promotion?
Yeah, actually, Jesse and I worked together on that, Mrs. Moisen. Jesse provided a lineup that he and I saw eye to eye right from the get-go. It was just a nice blend of different styles and different varietals there. I still haven't tried the Reserve Chardonnay. I took a bottle. I'm taking a bottle home with me tonight. I'm very excited to try that. I'm very familiar with the Reserve Cab, and the Soul of a Lion's just absolutely fantastic, as we're going to get into here shortly. But definitely more of a collaborative effort between Jesse and myself.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So this Reserve Cab is really great.
Well, we love it.
And I mean, given that I have only one liver to trash, which is the best? Which is the best of your wines to drink?
Soul of the Lion.
Definitely the Soul of a Lion.
Soul of a Lion is going to be a hard one to beat in that sense. So that's going to be the fourth wine that we're covering tonight. But yeah, Soul of a Lion is our flagship wine. So we'll get a little more into that later on, but it's very hard to beat. But like I said, the Reserve Cab is always one of the favorites too. So you can't go wrong with any of our wines. I'd say if you enjoy it, make sure you take home a case or two or three or four or five, just because we always sell out of the wines too, especially with these. They're a much smaller selection and supply than what you're going to find typically. And that was a big reason for showcasing them tonight as well. All right, so Reserve Cab, if there's no more questions, I would love to move on to our next.
I have a quick question.
Yes, please ask.
So if we haven't ordered the wines yet, is there still time to do so? More a question for Francis, perhaps?
Absolutely, Mrs. Mehta. We've actually gone through, I haven't told the boys yet, but we've already sold 8 cases of wine, and that was just basically to members who are joining the call this evening. We're going to be running this special through the entire month of February. And, as everyone on this call is already more than familiar, our pricing structure is better than anything else out there. It's one of the amenities we love to offer to you all as the members, and some really fantastic deals. So
I had another question. So given that we're opening in person, this week, will we be able to try some of these wines so we can make up our minds what we want?
100%. I will. I'll pop one of each, and we'll do a little Corrigan for the soul of a lion, and I'd be more than happy to show you the beauty that is DAOU. That would be my
Great.
pleasure.
I'm happy
Thank you
to.
so much. We'll be there.
I'm happy to bring some samples too, Francis, and I'm sure Jesse will supply with them. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Anna. Thank you.
Know. Yes, more than willing to help. All right.
Anita, please invite us whenever you're doing that.
Say that one more time.
I was telling you, please invite us whenever you're, Francis or Anita, whenever they're opening all these wines at the club.
Absolutely.
Yes. Now on to our next wine. For the sake of time, I'm going to share my screen real quickly because I have another video to share, and it's with a new wine that we just released as well. So can everyone see this?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I wonder why I hadn't heard of it.
Yeah. Looked on the website and couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I know there are a lot of people from Punjab on this call, and Soul of the Lion is right up your alley.
Yes, I thought of that, Revati.
Kintsugi. Broken pottery is restored, reimagined, and gilded to create something even more beautiful than the original. This is us. This is humanity. We all experience brokenness, but we are ultimately healed and strengthened by the loving hands around us. This is the story and the lesson of Bodyguard. When brothers George and Daniel DAOU were children in Lebanon, their lives were shattered by violence of civil war. It was their mother, Marie, who picked up the pieces, who stood firm in the face of chaos, and led the family to safety in a faraway country. Through this experience, the brothers would discover that light comes from darkness, that courage knows no bounds, and that true happiness is safety in the arms of love. Bodyguard is their homage to these timeless truths. It is a wine that, like us all, is greater than the sum of its parts. It is rich and powerful, intense and enduring. May it bring you pleasure in the moment and hope into your world.
All right, so I hope we were all able to kind of see and hear that, but that's a brand new wine that we released to our portfolio, which is known as Bodyguard. So a different wine. It's going to be a Petit Verdot and a Petit Syrah blend. And if we have some big kind of wine geeks like me out there, when you hear Petit Verdot and Petit Syrah, you think, how could this possibly work? Because basically both varietals stand for color, tannin, structure, and power. And you would never think that they would mesh well, but Daniel was able to make a wine that's very kind of has those mouthfeeling characteristics and velvety smooth with a great finish as well. But just a new wine that we wanted to showcase too. Very different, goes great with a variety of different meats and cheeses as well. If you go down to Paso Robles, boar is kind of a big problem that we find down there. So you have boar hunters And we were actually able to have a party once where we roasted a boar, and we're able to have it with a bodyguard too. So it goes extremely well with that if you're looking for any dishes to pair along with it too. But another fabulous wine, and a cult wine too, and just how the story goes as well. We were able to kind of see and hear that one there with a beautiful video. But it's actually made after their mother, Marie. She was seen as the bodyguard, essentially, of the family because she was always protecting her children. And of course, going through the Lebanese Civil War was a very hard time, but their mother was always their protector. So a wine made for their mom too, and it's a very big, kind of powerful wine as well.
Are they estate grapes?
So this is going to be sourced fruit. So we actually do not grow any Petite Syrah on the estate. We focus on Bordeaux varieties. So you have the Cabernet Sauvignon majority. You're also going to have Cab Franc, Merlot, Malbec, Petit Verdot. And then we have 3 white varieties as well. You find Sauv Blanc and Semillon, which does as an estate, basically white Bordeaux, but estate Sauvignon Blanc. Our only exception is a little Chardonnay that we have on the property.
Yeah.
Is it
This wine actually?
Yes, Paso Robles. So all the fruit, we only have one exception where we go outside of Paso, and that's for the Pinot Noir that we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
Jesse and Brandon and Luis Paul, we love this. We're drinking Bodyguard and we love it. We love Petite Syrah, and this is a bold wine,
Yes.
a good price point.
Yeah.
Francis, we hope it's on the menu.
It
Thumbs
is
up.
now. It is
Thumbs
now.
up. I love it.
I was going to say that this is a wine that I think showcases Daniel's talent as a winemaker. As Jesse said earlier, there's over 40 varieties that are planted in Paso Robles. So, you know, Daniel doesn't, even though we're a Bordeaux house or considered a Bordeaux house, and we focus on those varieties, Daniel doesn't want to be constrained to that. He wants to be able to, you know, uniquely play around with different varieties. So you may have seen our Pessimist Red Blend in the market. You'll see our Bodyguard and a few other releases coming here pretty soon. But, you know, this is Daniel's ability to showcase that I'm going to take 2 powerful grapes that are all about color, tannin, and structure, and that are big, and I'm going to tame them. So it's still going to be a big, bold wine that you can age for a very long time because of those 2 varieties, but at the same time, it's elegant and you can drink it now. I mean, the wine is beautiful. So.
I'll try it.
Yes. I recommend each and every single one of you try it. I mean, it kind of blew my mind in a sense because it was just something I was not expecting. I was expecting it to basically rip my face off when I heard about the varieties that were in there. And then it's just velvety, smooth, but a nice kind of big finish to it as well. But a very special wine in the DAOU portfolio that we have, and that's going to be offered to you as well.
I want to thank Francis for making a recommendation. We bought it and we're trying it tonight. It's really, really good, the Bodyguard. So it's a winner.
It really tastes like a Petite Syrah.
Yeah.
The strong good.
Yeah, no, it's a fabulous wine. So I definitely recommend each and every single one of you. If you have the chance, taste Bodyguard. You won't be disappointed by it.
Come see me tomorrow. I'll take care of you.
Should we taste it while we're watching the movie? That's the question, right?
You know,
the wine's better than the movie.
But it makes the movie better, right?
Jesse, a question.
Yes.
So you have DAOU Reserve, you have Unbound, you have Bodyguard, you have 1740, you have the Estate, you have the Soul of Lion. So where does Bodyguard fit into that spectrum?
Great question. So this is a part of our expressionist tier that you're going to find. So it's still a reserve level wine, basically, when it comes to the oak aging as well as the quality of fruit. But just kind of with the label, it's going to be one of our cult wines, as we call it. So it falls in with Pessimist, but it's going to be basically the next step up from our red blend Pessimist. So we will be adding different wines in the future. At DAOU, we're always innovating and growing and having different wines come in. But as of now, it's only those 2 wines in that category, but it's the highest level wine in the expressionist tier, as we call it.
Okay, interesting.
And then for the sake of time as well, I want to make sure I give Brandon enough time just because one of the main reasons I brought him, and it would be a crime if I didn't allow him to talk a little bit about the soul of a lion. Brandon, do you want me to play that video for you real quickly? Wonderful. Give me one moment. Let me pull that up real quickly, and I'll have one last video to share with each and every single one of you. All righty, and everyone can see, hopefully.
We grew up with an incredible father. He would come home, share all these wonderful stories that he encountered during the day at his work. And he tried to inspire us in every way to live the kind of life we're living today, pursuing our dreams, following our heart, and giving it all. And that's how we grew up, and our father was our real hero in our family. Every year, as we harvest the grapes here, we select the best blocks that come off the mountain and make a blend of it called Soul of a Lion in honor of our dad.
This is a celebration of those who came before us, and hopefully a celebration for those who are following us. So we cheers and we toast all of your parents and your grandparents, because without them, none of us would be here. So may the Soul of a Lion be in you and in your family, and thank you for supporting us in this adventure we have called Down Mountain.
And they're really into marketing.
All righty, and Brandon, I'll let you take this away since this is kind of your baby, the 2017 Estate Soul of a Lion.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jesse. And I won't be too long. I know that everyone wants to, get to their weekend, but we've talked about a number of different offerings from the DAOU portfolio tonight. You mentioned 1740 and a number of different wines, but the one thing I want everyone to understand and make no mistake about is that the reason why George and Daniel DAOU moved to Paso Robles, purchased this 212-acre property, was to produce Soul of a Lion. So that, I just want to get that clear, just right now. That's why they came. All of these other wines and these offerings that we have are an extension of what this wine means to George and Daniel. I told the story about Joseph DAOU, and this wine is named in honor of him. When Joseph was actually aging, there was a biographer that the brothers hired to hang out with their father and to kind of document different stories and stories that he wanted to share with future generations. And they actually created a book out of these stories. And at the end of it, the biographer looked over to Joseph and said, what do you want to call the book? And without hesitation, Joseph looked at the biographer and said, Soul of a Lion. And the biographer said that, it's an amazing name. It's a great name. Why? And he said, because what I've learned in my life as an older man now is that I want my grandchildren and my great grandchildren and future generations to know that, life is going to punch you. Life is going to, come at you. And no matter what happens, you always have to come back roaring with the soul of a lion. So that was one thing that he wanted to leave in the legacy with his family. And you see that with George and Daniel and with the wines that they produce, and also how it resonates in the love that Jesse and I have with what we do. We all feel that we have the soul of a lion, and we get to celebrate that feeling and that mantra, if you will, from Joseph DAOU by drinking this wine, by toasting with this wine. So let me ask you all a question really quickly. If there was a person that you admired the most in the world, that influenced you so much and gave you every opportunity in the world, and you were going to produce a wine that was going to be named after them, how would you make that wine? Would you cut corners? Would you, just use commercial yeast, or would you go the length, go all the way and make sure that everything was done with 100% quality, 100% attention to detail, and the mind and the precision of an architect or an engineer, if you will. And that's what Daniel and George did, not with just Soul of a Lion, but with every single wine in our portfolio that we talked about. The Soul of a Lion is the pinnacle. This is a wine that's 100% from our estate. So this is not sourced fruit from different regions or areas. This all comes from Down Mountain at 212 acres. These are some of the oldest vines on the property. Those vines that Jesse had spoke about earlier, where Daniel had planted the first 26 vines on Down Mountain himself in his double wide. So these are older vines from the estate. The property was planted in we purchased in 2007, planted in 2008. So these are, a little bit older vines. Everything is hand-picked. It's optical sorted. The the plantings, that the high density plantings that Jesse had spoke about earlier as well. We want our vines to struggle. We drop about 80% of the fruit because we only want the best for this wine. So Soul of a Lion has always been a very small production wine. This wine is aged for 22 months and 100% new French oak. Now, again, we are not going to spare any expense with producing this wine. So not only do we have new French oak, Daniel actually goes to Bordeaux every year and works with the different cooperages there to select the exact trees that he wants to be aged in the elements and for 5 years before they're created into barrels. There's a special type of oak that you'll find in a few select forests in France, where these trees, they actually give off this pink tinge, this pink oak. And this oak is actually called Bois Rosé. Daniel decided to create these barrels with just these Bois Rosé wood staves. What this does is it imparts a much softer tannin characteristic. There's a light toast on that barrel because of the phenolics that we have in our vineyard and the vineyard practices that Daniel has developed. We don't need extra tannin. We don't need extra power added to our wines, if you will, from the oak. We get enough of that from DAOU Mountain. The property that we have is called a Jewel of Ecological Elements by Dr. Andrei Chelychev way back in the 1960s. So he knew it was special then. Daniel knows it's special now. The calcareous clay soil with the limestone, the soil gives it that unique characteristic. The limestone that you get is going to give it that minerality and that complexity, but that clay is going to give it a little bit of a bouquet. It's going to give it that round mouthfeel that you get, and it's also going to add to the color and the floral notes on the wine. I mean, this is a wine that I drink on a regular basis, being the director, and I've tasted a number of different vintages, and I can tell you that if you look at any wine that's made of this quality and this attention to detail in the market, you're not going to find one that's less than $1,000 a bottle. I promise you that. And that's just not me saying that, but that's what you're hearing from all the top critics, all of our members, and all the people that taste and enjoy this wine, all of our partners. So to kind of sum things up with Soul of a Lion, and we'll take some questions. This is Soul of a Lion is Daniel's heart. You know, this is the wine that he made for his dad, and his father did a lot for him. He wanted to pay that back. And every time that we produce a new vintage of Soul of a Lion, which we release on February 11th every year, which is George and Daniel's parents' wedding anniversary, we release that wine and we celebrate Soul of a Lion. So I love to hear what your thoughts are about the wine or how you've experienced it when tasting the wine.
So it's a blend. What grapes are in it?
So this is a Cabernet Sauvignon, a little bit of Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot.
Nice. And how about the vintages? Kind of the question I asked earlier. Same as the reserve, the 12, 14, 16, 17, or?
So first vintage of Soul of a Lion was actually produced in 2010.
Okay.
This was after 3 years, so third leaf, and that wine right out the gate got a 96 point by Robert Parker. At the time, it was the highest rated Cabernet to ever come out of the Paso Robles region. Since then, it's the current vintage we're drinking right now, 97 point wine, but we decided not to produce Soul of a Lion in 2011, this is a little insider secret here. So if you find some 2011 reserve Cabernet, it's actually Soul of a Lion fruit. So that just goes to Daniel's attention to detail. He didn't feel that the quality of the wine, because he kind of classifies the fruit, right? When Daniel goes into the vineyard and he harvests everything, he picks everything, and then he goes through his process of finding out which fruit go into the discovery wine, so our DAOU Cabernet, what's going to go into the reserve program, what's going to go into Soul of a Lion, what's going to go into patrimony, and what's going to be blended in some of the other wines. And 2011, he said that I love this quality, but I'm not going to compromise Soul of a Lion, so I'm not going to produce it. So he used that fruit for the 2011 Reserve Cabernet, which I have probably about 6 bottles left. I think there may be a few more out there. So if you find that wine, 2011 DAOU Reserve Cabernet, it's actually Soul of a Lion fruit that's in there. So.
I'm on Cellar Tracker right now.
And let me know where you find it too.
Yes.
Brandon, how does this wine age? I mean, can you store it for 5-6 years and it still be good?
Yes, 100%. You can store this wine, and I hate to say this because Daniel says this in private when we're at his house in his cellar and drinking wine. He's like, you know what? This wine is going to outlive all of us and outlive our kids probably. And he doesn't say that from a way of, being dark, if you will, but it's just because when you look at the wine, the number one thing with the wine is the color, right? The phenolics on the wine. What is that? That's how those color molecules are going to bind to those tannin molecules. So the longer those bind and those hold, the longer the wine is going to last. When we all go to decant the wine, you get that sediment in the wine, right? That's when you have those unbound anthocyanins that fall out. I don't want to get too technical, but basically we want the wine to stay together for as long as possible. And if it starts to fall apart, then that means that you don't get the nose on the wine anymore. You don't get the fruit on the wine anymore. You don't get the zest of the wine, right? You just get, a separated wine. So with Soul of a Lion, I mean, this wine, again, is first vintage was 2010. This wine is going to be, my 2-year-old daughter will be enjoying this wine, at a later date.
So what year of Soul of the Lion is available at the club? This is a question for you and Francis, because Tracy and I are going to split a cake.
2017 for $25.
So I believe, current vintage, we are
2017.
2017. And again, this is a very small production. We're actually sold out of this wine at the winery and across the country. We still have a little bit in California because California is my home state. So I want to make sure we keep our best partners here in stock. But we will be releasing the 2018 vintage later on this year. But if you can purchase Soul of a Lion, I would please do. I think it's a smart decision, not just because it's an amazing wine, but
okay, Francis, Tracy and I are buying a case.
The orders are rolling in already, by the way, boys. Just wanted to let you know that. So yes, thank you. We will get that order placed.
Priority, Francis.
Wait a minute.
Everybody, and then we're gonna taste it hopefully at the club with you, right? Is that the deal?
It's really good.
Yeah.
So Francis, how many bottles do you have?
The large formats here so you can see. So we have magnums and 3 liters, 6 liters, 27 liters, small production of those wines as well that are at the winery. But it's a special wine, and we usually use those larger formats with celebrations, large parties, and things like that.
So Francis, how many bottles do you have of the 2017?
We have four left right now, and then I'm sure Anna, who's on the call, can speak to the inventory and stock. Maybe we'll just grab up everything else they have left if Brandon's okay with that.
It's been on the car since. Okay.
I'll take a look, but I do have a Corvin bottle that I can bring if you guys want to taste.
I just need a cup.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so we could put a few cases off to the side as well, and I'll make sure to talk with Anna about that too, because I want to make sure we're able to, if we're interested, to at least purchase it as well, just because it is the last of the vintage, it is the last of the 2017s, but I wanted to make sure we included it in the presentation tonight and had a little for some of the members as well. But fabulous, fabulous wine. I mean, Brandon, of course, we're thankful to have you on this call. George always has a fantastic saying when it comes to Soul of a Lion. So you have Daniel, who's the winemaker. George is his very competitive brother. He's technically our CEO, but we call him the life maker at DAOU. And his famous saying is that it takes 9 months to make a baby, but it takes 9 years to make a vintage of Soul of a Lion. So just with the barrel aging, having it grow in the vineyard, having it age in the bottle, I mean, no expenses are spared when it comes to Soul of a Lion. I know people on the financial team, and they basically want to rip their hair out whenever they see how much those barrels cost us each and every single year. So a lot is put into this wine, but it's really something special in a wine. Like Brandon said, it's comparable. I'd say its competition would be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a bottle. So such a fabulous price, and that's great because we are in Paso Robles, which allows us to do that as well.
Do you like the 2014, Jesse, of this vintage or this wine?
Yes. So the 2014 was one of my favorites, but I don't even know if that's around anymore. I think Daniel DAOU would be the only person who had that, but I love the 2017. 2017 was another good year that we had in Paso too. So I'd say go with the 2017 now, and we could see what potentially we could do with large formats if we have anything available as well.
Yeah. There's a place down in LA, it looks like it has it on Cellar Tracker, but
Wally's.
Yeah, you got it.
I know I sold it to him.
I'm going to order it right now.
Very,
get
very,
some
very
at the
small
club.
production of that wine, but we can actually, I mean, Francis is a long time friend, so I'll make sure we can kind of look at getting some of those back vintages in there for you folks that are interested. One of my favorite vintages, just to touch on that as well, is 2013. Is probably outside of the 2017, 2015 to 13 for me. I love that vintage just because it reminds me of the old world so much, with so much acidity and minerality. Like the fruit isn't as present on that wine, and it's just like most of the Soul of a Lion wines that you'll taste will be you'll get a lot of fruit, they'll be big, but this one is just like a switch up. It's like a change up, and it's really a good wine. So we'll share some of those with you guys.
Thank you,
Brandon. I saw the background that you have on that Zoom call with the tasting room. Is that tasting room open now with the new restrictions?
We just opened, I believe, this week, right, Jesse?
Yes, so Monday, when the governor lifted the stay-at-home orders, we did technically open up. Still, a lot of restrictions kind of in place with everything when it comes to travel and just the sizes of the group too. And we want to make sure we're staying as safe as possible and making sure we're not putting anyone in any bad positions when it comes to that. But I'll make sure to have Francis share my information with each and every single one of you, because if you are interested in going to Paso on a later date, please reach out to me and I'll do everything that I can. I know a lot of people working in the tasting room, and I'll try to set something up for each and every single one of you, just because we always appreciate you basically allowing us to come into your home, especially on this Friday night tonight, and just share some of our knowledge, some of our passions as well. And as you can see, me and Brandon really love, of course, working for this company, and of course, supporting some of our partners and supporting everyone who enjoys our wine and is willing to kind of take a chance with us. So
I was thinking I want to challenge Francis to organize a golf outing for this group, because he knows what we like early in the morning one day.
Let's play Hunter Ranch.
And then we go back tasting back at this
They're
place.
coming.
Hunter Ranch.
Hunter Ranch.
There we go.
And then I highly recommend the DAOU tasting room. It is
There we go.
absolutely one of the most beautiful spots in all of Paso Robles. I've been
So
there
Steve, you're
several
gonna do
times.
that? Organize a golf outing?
I
then
do
we go
it.
to DAOU?
Yeah, Hunter Ranch is a great place. I'll do it if you
If
want.
you organize it, Jesse and I will play with you guys out there. We'll come
Here we
bring
go.
our clubs out and we'll
And
play.
then we go for some wine and appetizers. How about that? Okay, I'll
Let's do
count
it.
on you guys to do that.
And a cigar, Joe. Don't
Here we go.
Yes.
Of course.
Of course.
Mais bien sûr, mon ami, bien sûr.
Hey, Francis.
I like this group. These are my guys here.
It happens, Francis. Make it happen.
It's a done deal. Consider it done, everybody.
Thank you, Francis, for all
Yeah, thanks.
this.
Great time.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Al.
Francis, Jesse, and
you,
Brandon.
Jesse.
Everything's perfect.
And if I can say one thing as well, if anyone has any wine in front of them, I'd love to kind of end it off with a toast as well.
Nice.
If we have the wine. So a famous saying that we have at DAOU is, if you want to walk fast, you walk alone, but if you want to walk far, you walk together. So we invite each and every single one of you to, of course, walk with us in experiencing DAOU and kind of living the best of your life. So thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
very
Cheers
much.
to that.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Nicely done.
Cheers.
Salud.
Ciao.
I think the soul of the lion and butter chicken.
Yes, you're gonna have. I'll make sure to come over.
Nice
Thank
one,
you, Francis.
Jesse.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anna.
Brandon, Jesse,
Thank
Anna,
you.
thank you. And Anna was the one that set this whole
Guys.
thing up. So just special thanks to her, and thank you for all the support, everyone. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you,
Thank
Francis.
you.
Have a good weekend.